Peru, 17 civilians died and 52 others were injured during the police repression on the sixth day of protests against Dina Boluarte's government. Also in Brazil, social movements mobilized to defend democracy and reject fascist and violent actions carried out by Bolsonaro's supporters. In France, Emmanuel Macron's government presents its pension reform despite the strong rejection of the measure by the civil society. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news. The latest report from the Peruvian Ombudsman's office confirms on Monday that at least 17 people were killed in Juliaca, in the department of Puno, due to the brutal repression by the security forces. According to the office's report, at least 17 people died and 52 were injured after the repression carried out by military and the police forces, who opened fire against the demonstrators. The Peruvian Health Ministry, through the San Roman Health Network, confirmed that at 9 p.m. local time on Monday, the casualties included civilians between the ages of 17 and 55, while at least 4 dead remained unidentified. This occurs within the framework of the indefinite strike that began on January the 4th to demand the closing of the Congress, the resignation of Dina Boluarte, early elections, a constituent assembly, and the release of the former president Pedro Castillo. These recent events bring the total number of casualties since the protests started to 46. On Monday, Brazilian social organizations mobilized to defend democracy and reject fascist and violent actions carried out by Bolsonarista groups. Several municipalities in the country are the scene of demonstrations in which popular and political groups reject the coup attempt, while denouncing the violent actions of Bolsonaro's followers as a criminal attempt. The demonstrators demand that all those responsible for the assault on the headquarters of the three federal powers be punished and that there be no amnesty for those who encouraged the attacks. As part of the investigation process, the federal police reported on Monday the arrest of some 300 supporters of the former president who were taken to the security headquarters. On Sunday, the intervener in the public security of the Federal District of Brazil, Ricardo Capelli, said that there will be no impunity for the radical Bolsonaristas who participated in the coup actions on Sunday. In statements to the national media, he reiterated that the vandalist actions, the looting actions, will not go unpunished, assuring that the authorities will go to the last consequences with the objective of identifying the guilty and send them all to jail, explained Capelli. So far, the Brazilian authorities arrested 1,500 people. Most of them were in the encampment calling for a military coup, but some of 300 participated directly in the invasion of the Congress, the Supreme Court, and the Planalto Palace, the seat of the government. Capelli reiterated that the law will be complied with so that it is clear that no one will attempt against the democratic rule of law in Brazil. And after the violent actions led by far-right sectors in Brasilia, people who advocate democracy came out to express their support towards the government of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Our correspondent Brian Muir with the details on the ground.
Hundreds of thousands of people came out in 19 of Brazil's largest cities yesterday to show their support for President Lula and his government against the far-right actors who tried and failed to stage a coup on Sunday.
What happened in Brasilia was absurd. It was a terrorist attack against democracy. If the Brazilian people or those who choose the path of peace and tranquility and President Lula don't come out to the streets to defend democracy, the people who defend a military coup will try to take over the country.
As leaders from around the world expressed their solidarity with Lula, Brazilians expressed outrage against former President Bolsonaro and the terrorists he allegedly incited to attempt to overthrow the government.
The Bolsonaro supporters who are trying to stage a coup are using our flag and our Brazilian football jersey pretending to be patriots. But what they're doing is not democratic, it's destruction.
To leaders from the labor unions and people's social movements such as the MST, it was an important show of force that gave a signal to society that the majority of the Brazilian population supports democracy.
The protests that are taking place across the country are against all the mobilization that took place in Brazil on Sunday that we know was an act of terrorism.
Brian Mir, TeleSUR, Recife.
Let's take a short break now, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The president of Chile, Gabriel Boric, received his Colombian counterpart, Gustavo Petro, in his first state visit to the country, with the goal of strengthening relations between the two nations. Through its official Twitter account, the presidential office announced the Colombian president was received by his Chilean counterpart at La Moneda Presidential Palace in Santiago. The meeting, which took place within the framework of the historical strengthening and shared values between the two countries, highlighted issues such as democracy, the environment, inclusive development, and social justice. Gustavo Petro began his first state visit to Chile by paying his respects at the monument to independence leader Bernardo O'Higgins. Bolivian President Luis Arce Catacora stated that the people will not allow a new attack against democracy after receiving the support of different social sectors in the department of Santa Cruz and the rest of the country. Through his social media accounts, the Bolivian head of state thanked the social organizations for their support towards his administration, given the recent coup attempts. Likewise, the social sectors denounced that the protests in the city of Santa Cruz are part of a policy to damage the country's economy. Given these destabilizing actions, the organizations requested the public prosecutor as well as judicial authorities to bring justice and to find those responsible for the 2019 coup. In France, on Tuesday, Emmanuel Macron's government presents its pension reform despite the strong rejection of the measure by the civil society. The reform proposes to raise the minimum retirement age from 62 to 64, probably under the pretext of achieving fiscal balance. The initiative is rejected by the French society, and in this sense, a survey published last Friday by the IFOP Polling Institute explained that 68% of those interviewed are against raising to 64 and 79% against 65. Meanwhile, the French cabinet convened a meeting with representatives of the trade unions to discuss the situation. Now we move on to other topics. The United Nations Secretary General appealed on Monday to developed nations to make good on their promise of over $100 billion a year to support climate action in developing countries. Antonio Guterres' comments came as part of his opening remarks at the UN conference aimed to help Pakistan to cope with the fallout of the flooding that killed more than 1,000 people and displaced about 8 million. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif joined the UN Secretary General in person at the conference, while other world leaders, including the French President Emmanuel Macron, took part virtually. With climate change-related disasters displacing more people than the armed conflicts, the Secretary General also encouraged greater efforts to ensure that within 5 years, every country in the world has early warning systems for climate catastrophes. In Indonesia, a massive 7.5 magnitude earthquake has recorded in the Arafura Sea, 308,000 kilometers from Tual City on the Tanimbar Island. The U.S. Geological Survey has said it erupted at a depth of 91 kilometers below sea level. According to Indonesia's Meteorological, Climatological and Geophysical Agency, the earthquake was recorded at 37 minutes past midnight local time. The agency also issued tsunami warnings on all coasts and nearby islands and asked citizens for several locations to go to elevated areas. So far, no casualties nor injuries have been reported. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Rwandan President Paul Kagame said on Monday that the country can know the democratic refugees from the Democratic Republic of Congo. In eastern DRC, a region rich in mineral resources, fighting between government forces and rebels from the M23 movement, a former Tutsi rebellion, has increased tensions with neighboring Rwanda, which the DRC accuses of supporting the militia. According to the UN High Commission for Refugees, the UNHCR, in November 2022, Rwanda had some 72,000 Congolese refugees. In a report published in December, UN-mandated experts said they had collected substantial evidence of direct intervention by the Rwandan Defense Forces on the territory of the DRC, at least between November 2021 and October 2022. Diplomatic initiatives have been launched to try to resolve the crisis in eastern DRC when an East African regional force led by Kenya is being deployed. In Kenya, 5 suspects appeared in court on Monday accused of involvement in the death of a prominent LGBTQI+ activist. The body of Edwin Kiprotich Kirupro, popularly known as 25-year-old Edwin Chiloba, was found last week stuffed in a metal box on a roadside in western Kenya. The country's National Commission on Human Rights said that Chiloba's death followed the unsolved murders of several other rights advocates for sexual minorities, Shaila Lumumba, Erica Chandra, and Joash Musori. Homosexuality remains a crime in Kenya, with penalties that include imprisonment of up to 14 years. Gabon's President Ali Bongo names on Monday the country's first female vice president. The holder of the nation's second position is 59-year-old Rose Christian Raponda, who had served until her nomination as prime minister, and who was also a former mayor of the capital Libreville and Minister of Defense. Osuka Raponda fills an office that had been vacant since 2019, making history for a second time since in July 2020 she became the country's first female prime minister. She had to navigate a delicate political scene as prime minister after a coup attempt in 2019, while Bongo was on prolonged medical leave following a stroke. Former Minister Alain Claude Bill Bainize will replace Osuka Raponda as prime minister and is supposed to form a new government. Gabon is one of the African countries gearing up towards presidential elections this year. Egyptian authorities said a cargo ship carrying corn that went aground early on Monday in the Suez Canal was refloated and traffic through the crucial waterway was restored. Admiral Osama Rubey, head of the Suez Canal Authority, said the ship suffered a sudden technical failure while transiting through the canal, and the authority deployed 4 tugboats to help refloat it. Rubey said did not elaborate on the nature of the technical failure. 51 vessels were expected to pass through the waterway in both directions on Monday. Marwa Maher, a media officer with the Canal Authority, said the vessel ran aground 5 a.m. local time and was refloated 5 hours later. And Syria hosted this weekend numerous Syrian, Palestinian, Iranian events to mark the 3rd anniversary of the assassination of the commander of the Al-Quds Force of the Iranian Islamic Revolution Guard Corps, Lieutenant General Qasem Soleimani. A grateful and validating gesture to the role played by Soleimani in support of the Palestinian cause and the anti-terrorist struggle of the Syrian soil. Our correspondent in Damascus, Hisham Wanas, with the details.
Contrary to the wishes of Washington and Tel Aviv, the axis of resistance has become more powerful because the assassination of Major General Soleimani and his comrades marked its new birth. This was stated by the participants in the forum organized by the Damascus-based Arab Writers Union and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement on the occasion of the 3rd anniversary of their assassination. We consider that the attack against Qasem Soleimani is an attack against Syria, as well as against the entire axis of resistance, which is why, through this tribute to his memory, we ratify the attachment to his fighting legacy, and we promise to remain firm in defense of our cause, following the example of leader and martyr Qasem Soleimani. Palestine was always present in the heart of the martyr Qasem Soleimani because all of his missions were a preparation for the great battle of liberation of occupied Palestine, a work that Palestinians living in Syria captured in an artistic exhibition in Damascus that gathers different stages of their struggle against the Zionist project. All the peoples of this region, such as the Syrian, Yemeni, Palestinian, and Iraqi people, suffer from occupation and intervention, and therefore we value very highly the support that the free people of the world can offer us, as did the martyr Soleimani, to whom we pay tribute today through this art exhibition of Palestinian artists living in Syria. On the other hand, the Iranian diplomatic mission in Syria, together with the Syrian authorities, marked the date in an act organized at the Al-Assad National Library in Damascus. The event highlighted the figure of Soleimani as an inspiring man and exceptional leader who left a lasting imprint on all parts of the resistance. It is true that we are going through a difficult situation, but this situation would have been worse now if it were not for the sacrifices made by both Qasem Soleimani and the Syrian Arab Army. And that is why we pay tribute today to the memory of these martyrs who made it possible for us to recover our safety in Syria and in other countries in the region. General Soleimani played a crucial role in the fight against terrorism in Syria, Iraq, and the West Asian region. A prominent role that the people of the area claim led to his assassination on January 3, 2019 in Baghdad during a U.S. airstrike ordered by former President Donald Trump, which they claim is evidence of their allegation that Washington is the main sponsor of the terrorist gangs that plague the countries of the axis of resistance.
Hisham Wanas, TeleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.